Hi everybody, it's Cash. Welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me today. I am not in my usual location. I'm in my cabin, like environment, because the other place is so noisy sometimes that it's very difficult to concentrate, so I came here. But I wanted to share with you the crossover pictures that came for Dr. Ruth Westheimer, the celebrity sex therapist. She died in the past few days, July 2024, at the age of 96, in her sleep, I believe. Now, because she was an American phenomenon, I knew very little about this woman, and yet when I came to do the crossover pictures, I didn't do her full transition because it's too soon, but when I came to do her crossover pictures, I had to put my sunglasses on. I was in a public place and I began to cry. I began to weep. There was something about her that touched me very, very deeply, and I still don't know why, really, but she did have a phenomenal life. At the age of 10, during the Nazi reign in Germany, she was a German Jew, her parents sent her off to Switzerland to avoid the worst of it. Meanwhile, they stayed behind and they went to a concentration camp and were killed by the Nazis. She then, after the war, went to what is now Israel. I think she became a sniper. She was only 4'7" tall, yet she became a sniper. Learned how to handle a gun, and I think at one point almost lost her feet when a missile exploded close to her. From there, she went to America, and she got a great education. She went to Cornell to train as a sex therapist, and her rise was then unstoppable. She had radio shows and TV shows. There was an off-Broadway play about her. She wrote about 42 books. This woman was a meteorite flying through the firmament. And finally, she died at the age of 96. So I thought I would go into her energy and see what happened. And this was, to me anyway, absolutely fascinating. When I found her, she was standing, staring into that dark tunnel that I see is it's a bit like the interface between form and formless, between life and death. There's a tunnel, and it varies in length depending on the person themselves. And she was standing there staring at it, but she had manacles on her feet. She was so connected to life and living and giving and connecting to people as well. It was just a huge thing for her, and dying was a huge thing too. And she looked into this tunnel and said something like, okay, so what do I do? What's expected of me? What's the next step? And she thought there was something had to be done to cross over, when in actual fact it's the opposite. It's as if the universe said, just let go of life, yield. Let me take you and do the rest. And this was hard for her, as far as I could tell. She didn't want to relinquish control. I assume that having been this small person who created an enormous body of work and reputation, you don't get to be that major personality without a degree of determination and control, and this was stopping her crossing over. So what do I do? What's the next step? But once she'd realized that it was about surrender and yielding, and maybe her strength was such that she didn't have the mojo, the drive, to remain alive at that point after a full life, she just let go. She surrendered. And as I watched, her form turned, metaphorically speaking, to dust and floated gently into the tunnel. That would tie in very closely with her dying in her sleep. Interestingly, in the tunnel, I had her there and I saw her there. She was like a Russian doll. Starting off this size, then a smaller version came out and went along. She left the big version behind. Then another small version came out and she left the middle version behind. What actually crossed over in the end was Corolla Siegel, her birth name, her authentic self. Everything else, the personality, the control, was left behind. She still struggled as far as I could tell. It was almost like somebody who is parachuting down and can't get the cord to go. They're struggling. She didn't know what lay ahead, and she needed to know what lay ahead. But when she got into that symbolic cave that I always see, it was almost like she had a cushion of air under her. She was not going to be allowed to fall. There was no need to struggle and panic. It let her down gently. The result was pure relief. A leaning back thinking, it is over. Whatever burdens she'd carried were gone. Whatever weakness she'd felt in her body, or aches and pains, or problems, or whatever she might have been facing, gone. She was free. And this was a freedom I suspect she didn't feel in her entire mortal life, right from being a frightened girl during the Nazi era. She had never felt fully at peace, fully at ease. She was always striving, always building, always making stuff, because she was fleeing a difficult childhood and her insecurities. This 4'7" figure was a giant, but it was a construction also. And now she didn't have to try. She didn't have to pretend to be bigger than she was. It was just pure relief, a sense of a burden being lifted. And she was free. And when she went and looked up the tunnel, it was with a mix of relief, but also curiosity. Like, on to the next thing. What is this? She must have had that kind of mind, constantly inquiring, constantly trying to sort things out. And she looked ahead, thought, wow, I'm ready for this. And off she went up the tunnel. And I think the reason this made me emotional was not because of her, because I didn't really know much about her when I did the pictures, but because I've been to Israel, I've been to Holocaust museums, I've seen the horror as it's being captured by these places, and I've talked to people who were in Auschwitz. Their stories distress me greatly. And obviously, even though they were very old, these people, the memory never left them of what they'd experienced. And I just think that it's some trace of that was in Dr. Ruth, having lost her parents to a concentration camp. That was in Dr. Ruth, that once she experienced that freedom and relief, meant that I felt some aspect of it too. A sense of, they can't get me. It's over. I'm free. And I found that very moving. She was incredibly brave, incredibly spunky, determined, and showed that any amount of disadvantage we might start off with, whether it's a physical thing or a situational, geographical thing or whatever, if we just keep going and we live up to our full potential and we say yes to life's opportunities as they arise without being too self-conscious or worried about what people will think and so on, if we just go for it and have a sense of humor about it, we can achieve great things. That is what I learned from Dr. Ruth.